Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. Welcome to this week's episode. I am excited to be sharing my thoughts, reflections, and contemplations about the astrology of the week ahead, as well as the energies. This is for the week of April 29, 2024. And as always, I invite you to tune inwards and to really feel into what your body, what your heart, what your spirit are wanting to share with you as you are listening to my words. So the way we're going to flow in this episode is I'm going to share a little bit about the astrology of the coming week, and then we're going to go straight into the teaching of the planetary guides that are coming forward. And what I was told when I tuned into this coming week is to share the teachings and go straight to the meat, to strip away the bones. And so this episode is a bit of a boneless meat dish. We're going to touch back into the astrology at the end of the episode, but I'm going to go kind of straight into some of the messages that want to come through. So the astrology of the week is as such. On Monday, April 29th, we have Venus entering Taurus, and then we have the Mars-Neptune conjunction in Pisces. On Tuesday, the 30th, we have Mars entering Aries. On Wednesday, May 1st, we have Venus in Taurus squaring Pluto in Aquarius. And then on Friday, the 3rd, we have Mars in Aries sextiling Pluto in Aquarius. And so the first thing that stuck out to me as I looked at the astrology of the coming week is the significance of having both Venus and Mars be in domicile, right? By the middle of the week, Venus will have been in Taurus, Mars will have been in Aries. And while this is not a particularly rare occurrence, I believe the last time this happened was in 2022, this is a placement that carries a lot of power. We're entering into a chapter in the Venus-Mars relationship that to me really does carry a lot of potency, a lot of creative potential, and can also bring a lot of outburst. Venus and Mars are both forces that relate to desire, that relate to creation of life in the material, corporeal plane. Venus and Mars are not really about ideas or about ideals. They're about very embodied experiences, right? When we think about what they represent, when we think about Venus as relating to pleasure, Mars as relating to stamina or will or drive, these are the things that we can only experience through our bodies, right? We can't really experience pleasure, for example, without having a body. Like, what does that even mean? Perhaps that exists on some level or some plane, but we as humans don't really have access to that kind of pleasure, right? And so, in that sense, this particular chapter, whenever we have Venus and Mars both in domicile, to me, there's something significant about bringing to life the dreams and the ideas that matter to us, right? It is a significant period of time in terms of putting your life force where your heart is, in terms of allowing yourself to not only want what you want, but to do something about it. The word manifestation comes forth for me. So I'm going to talk about it. And to me, this is a word that carries a lot of charge. There's a lot of misunderstandings, misapplications, perhaps even misuse in the name of manifestation, which we're not going to name here because otherwise we'll just spend all day talking about it, right? This is something that you probably have encountered in your journey, or you've kind of come to your own understanding about what that word means. Hopefully, that's the point where you are if you are listening to this podcast. And I want to remind you that my job isn't to make you trust me. My intention here is to have you trust your own experience, trust your own knowing, and to trust your own questions. Because as you are listening to me talk about how I understand manifestation in my own cosmology, through my own experience, through the body that I live in, and the experiences that I've had, hopefully that also creates space for you to explore what this word might mean for you and the ways in which exploring that concept might be relevant to you. And so, I want to bring it forth because this concept of manifestation feels important during a week like this, right? It feels important to spend some time working with this concept, because in working with the concept intellectually, as I expand on it, hopefully we create more space so that we can allow ourselves, our system, our aura, our spirit to collaborate and to really start allowing our life force energy to move into places and projects and relationships that actually matter to us, right? This feels to me like not just the week where we are going to be planting the seeds. This is the week where we are really starting to take active measures to grow these seeds, right? And underneath all the distortions that have come through some manifestation teachings, I believe that there's some wisdom there, right? You can't throw out all of these teachings without getting deeper into what they may have for you. I mean, you can if you want, but for me, that seems like a bit of a wasted opportunity a little bit here, right? So in my lens, through what I've learned from various practices, from my own trial and error, manifestation is the nature of the universe. Manifestation is the nature of the universe and reality, right? It's this idea of as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, as without, so within. Right? There is a quality in which this is about constant communication. There is a quality in which this is about fractality, right? A lot of New Age teachings have kind of stripped away the potency of this and narrowed it down to personal will and personal agenda. And I don't think that's entirely wrong, but I think to think that that is the entire picture is often not accurate and doesn't honor the largeness of this teaching, right? To me, this is not so much a teaching that asks you to orient around getting what you want, to orient or bend reality to your will, but rather around coming to an acute awareness of the interconnection between spirit and matter. Right? Between the principles of giving and receiving, between the inner and the outer. It's not so much about balance between these seemingly opposite forces, but rather it's about how there's constant interplay between these realms of existence, how the borders between them, the gate that kind of delineates them is actually not as solid as we like to believe it is. It's about learning how to communicate with reality, with the web of life in the essence of truth, right? It's about communicating as they are and as you are, rather than through the veils and the lenses of what you believe you are. So this is something to unpack, right? I just said a lot of words there that may seem quite esoteric or quite opaque, but let me see if I can kind of get this into the level that is more easily digestible. So to me, the first principle of manifestation is to understand that we don't see the world as they are. We see the world as we are. And to acknowledge that our perception of ourselves is not pure, right? Our perception of ourselves has been distorted by our conditioning, by how we're educated, by the rules and the structures that governments or authorities, societies have created for us, right? And so, in a sense, the first place to start is to understand that our perception, in order to come to an ability to truly perceive, to see things as they are, requires a lot of skill, requires a lot of practice, and requires us to constantly create space for all the reactions that come up as we are doing that, right? In the process of acknowledging that we don't see the world as they are, but rather as we are, we begin to ask, what other ways of being are possible for me, other than the ones that have been prescribed, right? What other roles can I play in reality other than the ones that I believe I have been assigned? Who else can I possibly be other than the labels, the stories, the narratives, the mythologies that have been prescribed to me and that I have unconsciously believed as being who I am? It's about coming into a more expanded, that word is strange to me. I don't know if expanded is the right word here. I think it's about coming into a truer relationship, a relationship that's more rooted in the present moment, right? In every now moment between our spirit through our bodies. In some sense, this is reminding me of one of the sayings that my teachers, Madison Nees, like to say, which is something along the lines of the way into the other realms is through this realm. The way into the other bodies that we have is through our physical body. There's a quality about giving ourselves permission to be as embodied as we can be in that moment without forcing or pushing, that opens up space so that we can see what else is possible. In a way, the more we are in our bodies, the more we see the different possibilities. And I have a caveat there about what deep embodiment means, because I think that sometimes we have a concept of what it means to be embodied, and then we force ourselves to get into that concept, which to me is not really true embodiment, right? True embodiment is responding to the moment and being present to the moment, which is different than imposing some sort of mental concept about how we need to be embodied. And so I want to begin with that definition, with that awareness around the qualities of manifestation that's possible in our reality, because it feels important to kind of touch base with our relationship to the word and to the concept. And so my sense is that this is a collective theme that will be a strong current during this time window where Venus and Mars are domicile. So the reason why I want to share all of this with you is to invite a cultivation of discernment around using our creative energy. We live in a world that equates our creativity or the potency of our creativity with what we produce, both the quantity of what we produce and the success of our creations seem to be confused and conflated with the creative force itself, right? Which also bundled within that concept, there's something about our worth, about our divinity, about our connections with all of life, right? So to me, an unconscious and unexamined relationship with the concept of manifestation can bring up a lot of suffering. Based on my observations, the world population are kind of divided into two camps when it comes to manifestation and the channeling of our creative energy. There's one camp that has a lot of creative energy and therefore need to cultivate deep, profound discernment around how they choose to channel their creative energy. And the other camp actually maybe don't have that much genuine energy, right? Yet may feel the pressure to perform and therefore may run the risk of pushing themselves past what is in flow, what is nurturing, and what is true for them. In human design theory framework, we can think of this as a sacral definition, right? Some people have sacral definition, and when you have sacral definition, you have your own access to life force energy. And so even if you have a lot, especially if you feel like you have a lot and you're in a period where more is activated, then you need to be really careful about how to channel that, right? And you need to really feel into how can I make the decision around, is this the right project for me? Is this the right relationship for me to be investing my creative energy into? And for those who are non-sacral beings, the calling there is to be very aware, right, of the ways in which you push yourself past your own limits, because you don't have this consistent access to that creative life force energy. And so I want to give a couple examples here around the ways in which these are kind of cautionary tales, right? Or at least I phrase them as cautionary tales. And to me, hopefully, the intention is that in sharing this, you can become aware of the different ways that we distort our own creative energies, or we are trapped in certain ways of being in relationship with our creative energy that actually are not always in service to that flow that are always available to us, right? That flow is really our nature in some ways. So the first example is you may see other people creating a lot, and you see these people sharing externally or perhaps even reaching a level of success with it. And in the meantime, you're either not feeling the energy arising for you at all, or you don't feel the call to work on anything, or maybe you are being called to work at a different pace, one that's more methodical, slower, maybe less dynamic, or less external. Because you are not everybody else, you will have your own timeline, right? You will have your own curriculum, meaning you will not be making the same thing, you will not be making it in the ways that other people are making it. And if you are currently not making a lot externally, you may be pulled into mental grids that are looking like comparison, right? Looking like a lot of questioning yourself, looking like putting yourself through the ringer, making yourself suffer for your lack of output. You may think, and this is where I think manifestation teachings, right, have impacted us on deeper levels, especially the distortions of them. You may think something along the lines of, since my thoughts create my reality, and my reality doesn't look like what I want, there must be something wrong about the way I think. I think there are a couple important pieces of awareness that need to be kind of brought back online, in order to really ground us into what is versus getting lost in that fantasy land, right? And in this case, fantasy land is not always positive, right? Fantasy land can also be the miserable version of fantasy, the nightmarish version of fantasy. Like, to me, getting pulled into comparison, especially if you are doing something that is deeply coming from the depths of your soul, that is really about your own unique creativity flowing through you, is so ridiculous, right? There's kind of a comedic quality to comparing our artistic output or creative output, because of course it's not going to look the same. Of course your journey is not going to look the same, because the energy that's flowing through you is not the energy that's flowing through everybody else, right? But in any case, the two awarenesses that I want to share here is, number one, you really don't know the experiences of others, right? What you perceive as productivity or as success may not feel like it for the other person. You are always looking at the other person through the lens of the outside looking in, right? There's always some level of distance and maybe even distortion there. You're not them, and you simply cannot know the thought processes and the embodied experiences that these people are going through. And the second awareness that I want to share is even the thought of there's something wrong with the way I think. This may really be coming from conditioning, right? You may have grown up in a society or in a household that holds certain prejudices, some preconceived notions about how to be a useful member of the society or of this tribe or this family, right? There's actually very little value in doing a lot of busy work, especially when the busy work is not personally satisfying to us or is not contributing to efforts that are personally satisfying to us, right? There's very little value in belittling our lack of productivity or berating ourselves for not having the results that we want. I'm not talking about whether there's this deeper layer here, right? Like perhaps when we are feeling creatively blocked, or we're kind of feeling a lot of quietness in our creative journey, there's a possibility that there's resistance there, right? But what I'm talking about is this voice that's kind of barking, right? We may call it the inner critic, or we may call it the inner guard, or like the I call it like the terrible Terry. Apologies to anybody who's named Terry who's listening to this, but like the terrible Terry that's like telling us like we're not doing enough, right? To me, there's something kind of comedic about that line of thought, actually, right? Because sometimes the optimum thing to do is to actually just enjoy ourselves and to witness others in their fertile creative process and to celebrate them without feeling the push or the pressure to do what they're doing, right? And how much more enjoyable can your reality become if you let yourself not do anything that you are not being called to do? You know? How much more fun will your experience be if you channel your existing energy into celebrating others rather than berating yourself or berating others for that matter, for their level of productivity, right? The second example I want to share is when we experience the opposite, right? Maybe something is calling to us. We are on fire, we are inspired, but we don't fully allow ourselves to express. We don't allow ourselves to fully be in the flow of creation because we're maybe afraid of what others may think, or we are worried that we're not going to satisfy our own standards, and therefore we may run the risk of disappointing ourselves, right? Or we're worried that we're going to run out of energy, or maybe we just get stuck in patterns of habits that we are used to running, right? This is something that I experience a lot, actually. I feel inspired to do something, and then I get stuck in like all the things that I've had to do, my daily reality. There's a certain kind of inertia, right, that I think we can wrap ourselves around that can make it difficult for us to actually make space to listen to the creative calling that wants to come through us. To me, this kind of resistance is very interesting because they actually require a lot of engagement. Right? This is the kind of resistance that may come from a lot of different sources, and they may take a lot of different shapes. And you can spend the rest of your life doing different practices, learning different modalities to work through them in the ways that are just right? And yet sometimes, to me, when we are in this space, what we are being called is to take imperfect action. To create the project that kind of missed the mark despite our best intentions. To share the offering that only a couple people ended up signing up for. To create a piece of art that ended up getting a lot of negative reactions, right? And that path, while it's not necessarily pretty or pleasant, it's important to remember that they may not necessarily be out of alignment. Just because something resonates, just because there is alignment, doesn't mean that it's going to be easeful or pleasant, right? And there's a part of us that can get a little bit scared when we think about this, because if the experience is going to be somewhat painful, why would I do it in the first place? Like, why don't I just sit around and do nothing? To me, the reason why it's important to go out and do it anyway is because oftentimes what our creative forces are asking of us is not to create the masterpiece, right? It's simply asking us to engage with it. And in the engagement, something transforms. So let me give an example, right? You may be invited into creating maybe a piece of music or a piece of art that gets a lot of negative reactions or gets no reactions at all, right? And that can help you be on this path. It may invite you into a path of deeper contemplation around why it's important for you to have your artwork be well received by others, right? Because those are two separate things. To express ourselves, right? Like, this is something that I go through a lot in my own journey. My internal dialogue, or like my brain, likes to tell me that your creative process is your own process. Like, what matters is just for you to translate what comes through you as faithfully and as accurately as possible. But then I put things out there, and then when I get some negative reactions, sometimes, not every single time, but sometimes I get upset, right? And so that upsetness is showing me that there's something for me to look at there, And I can rattle off 1,000 different explanations about what it is that I may be asked to look at, but it's going to be different every single time, right? And when we're really looking at that, and when we're really allowing ourselves to be in some kind of relationship or conversation with that feeling of disappointment, that feeling of disappointment is an alive being, right? It's going to tell us something slightly different every single time. And so the point is to be in relationship with that force, right? The point is that there's something here that is asking us to be tended to, that is asking us, hey, can you spend a little bit of time with me? Can you have a morning cup of tea with me, right? And it's not easy. There's something kind of painful about being with some of these negative feelings or emotions, but sometimes that's what we're being called to move towards, right? Not in like a masochistic kind of way, but in a way that for us to be in relationship with that elation or expanded sense of creativity, we also need to be with its sibling, which is that contracted feeling, right? And so trusting that what we're being called towards is not going to lead us astray, even if it might be leading us into an exploration of manifesting something that doesn't feel super great to us, but is actually deeply instructive and has some deep wisdom for us to look at, is to me one way that we need to that we can work with our creative forces, right? So I feel like I have just said a lot of words, but I'm going to try to kind of tie it all in together, right? In as few words as I can. To me, manifestation is really about being in relationship. It's about creating a bridge between the internal world and the external world. It's about creating a relationship between inspiration and form, right? It's about creating a bridge between our creative guidance or inspiration and our creative practice, right? And there's no perfection here. It's just about taking a step in the direction that we are being called, right? And then trusting that as we take that step in that direction, once we take those steps, we're going to end up in a different place. And when we are in a different place, we're going to be asked to recalibrate. If this sounds like a lot of work, it kind of is, right? It may not take a long time, but we are constantly asked to readjust, and we are constantly asked to reorient and pivot, right? Because life is responsive. Life is alive, right? May sound obvious, but that's the truth, and so as we're interacting with the aliveness of life, we're also asked to constantly respond to it and to constantly shift and to constantly ask for more information, right? And so this week to me is really about, in some ways, staying in our own lane, being deeply in touch with the unique ways that these creative energies want to move through us, right? If you find yourself in comparison mode, getting taken out of your center, maybe with doubt, right? Or with criticisms, chances are you're working with energies in your field that are not really yours, right? And so create some space to look at that. Create some space to look at what's mine and what's not mine. Create some space to really validate your own experiences. And then look again at your creation or at the market and see what's the appropriate next steps are, right? See what the next course of actions are. Because creative process to me is always moment by moment, right? We're not really here to create a blueprint and then to execute that perfectly to a T. Because when we do that, the moment we do that, we are taking the life out of the creative process, right? The creative process is one that is always shifting and being shifted by reality. So let's really quickly touch on the astrology here at the end. There are some cool features of the astrology of the coming week that I want to make sure I talk a little bit about. As I mentioned, Venus and Mars will be in signs where they're domicile, right? This means that they are highly resourced to fulfill their agenda, perform their duties, play their roles, and they both also will have aspects to Pluto in the coming week. What's interesting about this is that Pluto is going to be squaring Venus and Pluto is going to be sextiling Mars. A square is a hard aspect, right? And so when we think about Pluto, Pluto has to do with power. Pluto has to do with unconscious stirrings that drive our incarnation. And there's some challenges, right? There may be some challenges or renegotiation or a shifting of the rhythm with the benefic, while there's kind of an easeful collaborative aspect with the malefic. So the ways that this can show up is that it may be, you may be aware of the ways in which it's a lot easier to take the shortcut, right? To kind of use force rather than to prioritize the things that are really valuable to you. And so if you notice that and you're kind of at the fork of the road, is that the right term? When you're really like in this moment of choice, right? Of, do I really be with my values, what I know will nourish me in the long term, or do I just go with the quick gratification? My invitation is for you to contemplate on this aspect, right? That Pluto is making a square to Venus and a sextile to Mars, and to look at it in the scheme of the bigger picture, right? Like, what's really being asked of you here? You know, is it more important that you build something that ultimately feels good but has no instant gratification, or is it better for you to just react in this moment, right? To me, there's benefits and there's a downside to each of these options. We also have the Mars-Neptune conjunction. Neptune, of course, is the planet that brings confusion, that brings moral questions. Neptune also takes us up and out a little bit, right? There's kind of a quality of Neptune that has access to a larger perspective, but often one that is colored by a little bit of a haze, right? We don't always get to see what is beyond the mist with Neptune. And so this may be important if we have to make, you know, kind of urgent, quick decisions, to become aware of the fact that there may be deeper layers that need to be tended to, and to, as much as possible, maybe slow down, right? As much as possible, try to get more information around this, rather than just kind of doing something out of reactivity. So with the entanglement or the interactions that the outer planets, maybe even the word interference is kind of coming into my consciousness here, that are present in the Mars-Venus story, we have a situation where we have resource planets who are able to do their task and impose their agenda with little issues on the surface, right? While at the same time, there may be larger forces that are kind of guiding this process along, right? And to me, some of these larger forces feel a little bit challenging, you know, that they may, what I'm trying to say here is that moving too fast, right, which Mars and Venus can do, because these are really forces that are acting on a body level, on an instinctual level, rather than from the bigger picture, may actually be a little bit dangerous. That we may, I think caution is very wise during this period. Both Mars and Venus in domicile speaks to a kind of creativity, a kind of fecundity, a certain kind of passion. There's something very exciting about it, right? And I think that we can really enjoy all of that without being pulled into reactivity that we might regret later on, right? That wisdom is not dead, as I like to say it, right? And I also want to kind of give the larger context of the cosmic ecosystem here, because the movement of Mars and Venus into signs where they are at home does impact the cosmic ecosystem and lends a different color to the celestial drama here. So when we think about the other planets, so Sun and Jupiter, they're in Taurus, right? And so because they're in Taurus, they answer to Venus because Taurus is Venus's land. And then we have Saturn, which is currently in Pisces, and Saturn answers to Jupiter, which is in Taurus and therefore also connected to Venus, right? And so when Venus was in Aries, the Sun and Jupiter and Taurus are impacted by Venus kind of working overtime, right? There's a quality about Venus and Aries that has a lot to do with, to me, kind of parsing through layers that are preventing us from truly kind of settling and being with the pleasure of existence, right? When Venus enters Taurus, there's a certain kind of relief that Venus experiences that to me also will impact Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn, right? There's space opening up here so that we can see and experience the pleasure of some of the diurnal activities. The reason why I say that is because Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn are diurnal planets, right? They belong to the day camp of the traditional planets. And so diurnal planets rule the executive functions, right? They rule the things that we do on the surface level of reality in order to make our dream worlds possible, right? The diurnal planets rule external actions. They're about executive functionings. They're about taking actions on the material plane that will move the needle closer to that which we want, right? And so in that sense, Venus entering Taurus is going to, in my opinion, bring up a lot of life and juice back into like doing the thing, right? That connecting with the right people, working on the right project, answering the emails, right? They may be really supported to us as we are moving through this period. And Mercury is still in Aries, right? And is now going to be ruled by a domicile Mars. And so to me, I've already mentioned this before, but thinking about Mercury as the trickster, the psychopomp, the one that moves the story along, and then Mars as raw expression of life force energy that doesn't really like to be obstructed or filtered in any way. To me, this may bring a level of urgency that may not be rooted in truth, right? Not everything that seems urgent is actually urgent. And so the way to really distinguish the difference between true urgency versus artificial urgency is really to pay attention to our nervous system, right? And our level of resourceness on a physical body, nervous system level. If any of you are struggling with sleep, this is a really fabulous time to get to the bottom of that, right? Really address the issues that are contributing to the lack of rest that you are receiving. Because to me, when we are really jacked up in our nervous system, especially because we are not getting enough rest, that's when we can kind of get thrown off center a little bit, right? Okay, hopefully that helps. I think that's it from me by way of contemplations. I am wishing you a creative, exciting, passionate period of Venus and Mars both being in domicile. And as always, if any of you would like to receive a reading, check out my offerings. I offer different types of readings. I also do long-term mentorship if that is something that calls to you. All the links will be in the show notes below, and I still have a couple spots available for May. I wish you a beautiful week. I hope that as you continue to contemplate the idea of manifestation and your creative energy, that this is bringing a lot of revelation and excitement and joy into your life. I'm sending you so much love, and I thank you for being here with me.